Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Let me see some of these quotes. Pardon me for being a few minutes late. The coffee needed to be poured. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Good morning, Boo Boo. Hope you're doing well. Good morning, Brian. Hope you're doing well. Bon matin à tous. Good morning, everyone. Where do I sats? Beautiful day in Montreal. Where do I sats? I'm going to be headed back to the farm pretty soon. I got my cables. Internet should be good. Let's do some Bitcoin. Greetings from the Netherlands. I'm busy planning Bitcoin Amsterdam in October, everyone. October 12th to 13th. So if you're in Amsterdam, we're going to be talking about farmers. We're going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. So come on to Amsterdam, May 12th to 13th. Should be fun. Hope to see you there, Cat23. When is the book available on Amazon, Cat23? Given current, so it's taking me about a day or two to put these little videos together. And I got about 40 of them, let's say, to put together. So I'd say the full Amazon book should be there by the end of the summer, because my plan is to put the videos out first and then put a couple of chapters out in the meantime. I might do so the whole book by the end of the summer formatted. I already have some of the formatting, but I got to change a bit. But what I'm going to do is actually divide the book into 4 parts, sort of 4 acts, like a 4-act play. I don't know what that noise is. So a 4-act play, and I'll divide each act, because it's kind of written with curtains, if you will, right? There's like kind of a each time. So like a cliffhanger type of thing at the end of each, let's say 9 to 10 chapter part or act. So I'll put it out, one of those. Let's say, I'd imagine you're going to get one to buy on Amazon in a month, if that makes any sense. So so we're going to do it that way. So you'll have sort of 4 different acts you can buy as a book on Amazon, and then you can buy the full book on Amazon once that's over, and that should be September-ish. That's what I'm thinking. Cat23, thanks for asking. T-Dog, yo, good morning, Bitcoiners. Guten Morgen, everyone. Guten Morgen. Zhao Shanghao, sup, y'all? Zhao Shanghao, Ohio. What do you say in in Korean? It's just, hey, what's up, 안녕하세요. I don't know if there's a morning. I never said it anyway. Morning, P-Man. Oh, we got someone from Greece here. Wow, thanks for joining us. Hello from Kefalonia, Greece. You know, Billy, one of my like bucket list, I guess, if you want to call it. I still haven't been to Greece. It's crazy. I've been everywhere. I've not been to Greece. Can't wait to go. Want to see the stuff there, especially as people's minds are opening up to what happened in Egypt 10,000 years ago, or perhaps more. Like I said before, I'm really loving that people are getting into pyramids and advanced civilization, prehistory stuff. So the road there is through Greece. The Greeks knew. They knew what was up. So we're going to find out. All right, excited. Good. Thanks, Justin. It means a lot when Bitcoiners say they're excited about it, because I always worried that, because there is sort of, it's not a token. Like, I'm not trying to create a network for writers to do blah, blah, blah. I'm just trying to model what writers could do. And it does involve using a token, and it involves Bitcoin. I hope this is some people's access to their first Bitcoin reading this book. Not anyone here, of course. I think most of you are a little down the road already, but it's I think anyway, a pretty interesting way to do it, to tie intellectual property to this measurement system. Should be good. We'll see how it goes. Ted with some French here. Let's see what he says. Bonjour, monsieur. Le soleil est levé. Bitcoin est en marche. Super moment pour prendre un café. Very good, Ted. Indeed, the sun is up. I let Ted do it, so he reminded me, right? Ted has reminded us, le soleil est levé, right? The sun is up. And Bitcoin's running. We're good, guys. All that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. All right, you're here for some Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time, Moscow time. What do we got today? Well, there's some worry, a lot. Like I said, we're talking about prehistory, right? We're talking about what happened before the flood sometimes. And part of why I want to go to Greece is to just touch that ancient world. But be careful, be careful. Archaeologists say it's not scientific to assume gender of ancient human remains. So if you're part of any archaeological dig, if you're an Indiana Jones type of person, right, don't just, when you see that thing, don't just assume you know what they were doing, right? Because sex and gender are not the same thing, everyone. Okay? Who knew what those Tutankhamun were putting in their, body? So we got more. It's not just that, right? So the California Senate is passing a bill to redefine same-sex couples unable to get pregnant as infertile. Well, it fits. They're infertile, right? So I guess they can have that. Makes sense. Fox News says the Cartoon Network is going to introduce they/them pronouns into LGBTQ inclusive episode of a kids show. So if you're looking to get your kids out of the school system, you might have to take away their televisions. Not that they watch television. Don't. Anytime you hear like the Cartoon Network or some television thing is looking at kids, even Disney, my kids can't pay attention to Disney. It's past an hour. What are they going to watch on Disney? They're YouTube addicts. They do some shows, I guess. I shouldn't say they're totally into YouTube. All right, that's what we got. So I got one more fake news story here, but it's not exact. It can't necessarily be qualified as fake news per se. But the New York Times did take a moment to write about our man RFK Jr. because it looks like he's getting some good press. We're going to talk about that in a second. So we're only doing a small detour in America today. We're going to be looking out in the world a little bit. Pardon me, it's also a short show today because I'll be doing Fed Watch at 12:30 on Bitcoin Magazine with Ansel Linder. So if you didn't have enough of the breakup this morning, join us at 12:30. And Ansel, who I think is one of the best macro analysts in the game, it's not even close. The guy gets it right all the time. And I host a show with him every now and again and really like it and learn a lot when I host the show. So there you go. So here's the other fake news story that I wanted to mention today. And it comes from our friends at the New York Times. And they wrote an opinion piece on our friend Bobby Kennedy Jr. And they said, he's no Jack Kennedy. He's no Jack. He's no Jack. And Slug Daddy O observed that the minute the New York Times is pulling this stuff, and he did a bit of a compendium of the hit pieces that are being written about RFK Jr. lately. And what he says is, so many hit pieces, the man must be really threatening to the system. Let's elect him and find out. So that's what it's looking like. The New York Times said he's no. Now, if you guys don't know what that's from, it's from a famous political debate years ago. And it was the vice president. I think it was the vice president. Some of these people, who knows what's going on. And there was a kill shot during a debate where one of the people tried to cite, I knew John F. Kennedy or something like that, right? And the person he was debating against said, I knew Jack Kennedy, sir, and you are no Jack Kennedy. And it was sort of a famous kill shot from the 80s in American politics. I forget who the belligerents were in the debate. I'm thinking Dan Quayle was one of them, but he was the biggest joke in the history of the vice presidency until Kamala. She's Glenn Greenwald had a good quote about her today, that her cringe has become so extreme that people look forward to her video clips now, like actually, because you want to see the comedic relief. So the one she has now is that she's brought on stage for the Juneteenth thing in Washington, D.C. at the White House, and she just starts cackling. Yeah, Lloyd, there we go. Lloyd Benson. I knew it was Dan Quayle. So the line was, I knew Jack Kennedy, sir, and you are no Jack Kennedy. So the New York Times pulling on that memory for this headline, right? He is no Jack Kennedy. It just so happens that his policies are all exactly a continuation of Jack Kennedy. Oh, here's an interesting wink from the simulation. I never thought of this. This is a beautiful wink from the simulation. And now the times don't work out. But of course, Teddy Roosevelt was Franklin Roosevelt's uncle. Did you know that? If you didn't know. And by the way, Eleanor was also a Roosevelt, right? She is a granddaughter or whatever of Teddy. Maybe not granddaughter. No, it can't be. Maybe another niece. I forget what her relationship was. Anyway, Eleanor was closer in family relations to Teddy. There's two Roosevelts that came over from Amsterdam or Holland originally, the two wings. One of them were the Oyster Bay Roosevelts, and they are the ones that Teddy comes from. And Oyster Bay is a part of Long Island. And then there were the Hyde Park Roosevelts. And Hyde Park is where Franklin grew up. And it's right near Poughkeepsie up the Hudson River. So there were two branches of the family. They were originally related way in the old days when they first arrived. But the two brothers, I guess, back in the 1600s, they're that old. They were in New York when it was New Amsterdam. So that family goes back that far. They're some of the original New York City people. Obviously did very, very well. I remember actually seeing the house that Teddy grew up in Manhattan, just a beautiful brownstone right in the city. And I just noticed the plaque one day. And that's where he lost his wife and I think either daughter or mother. He had two deaths in the same day of two, and he sort of abandoned. No, yeah, it was the wife and I think the mother. Both passed on the same day. And the baby that was born, I don't remember who it was. It was two, and he was a great journaler, Teddy, by the way, a great journaler. Kept a journal every day of his life except that day. And he just wrote an X, and he said, "The light has gone out of my life." And it was actually what Richard Nixon read when he gave a speech to the White House staff after the deep state had managed their Trump type hit job, 30 years ago. So there you go, little historical anomalies. And so here's the thing that I was mentioning about Teddy, about RFK and Jack Kennedy. So in the same way that it was the nephew, right? So we're dealing with a nephew. So Franklin is Teddy's nephew. And one of Franklin's major goals as president was to see through a lot of Teddy's policies. So the New Deal and all of that stuff was actually hinted at by Teddy Roosevelt when he was president. He was going down that road, even though they're in separate parties, Republican and Democrat. Funny that the nephew's main goal was to realize the policy objectives of the uncle. Hey, and other than the Fed Reserve, right? That's the one that Franklin ignored, right? But hey, we might get a second chance here of nephews realizing the policy goals of their presidential uncles. And so thanks, simulation. We got a wink. Now let's get back to RFK. Why do we see these articles all of a sudden on the New York Times, the hit pieces? Why is this happening? Well, it could be because a poll came out yesterday, a major poll by The Economist, by YouGov, and it was released that says RFK Jr. has the highest favorability ranking of all the people running for president. So it's a big poll. Here's what Eric Jackman says about it. RFK Jr., who is running for the Democrat nomination for president, has a higher favorability rating than many of the other 24 presidential candidates, according to a new poll. So you can see there's a few more folks picking up on this story. But the most important thing comes from Red Stees, who wrote an opinion piece in Newsweek saying, RFK Jr.'s success is forcing the media to acknowledge COVID vaccine skeptics on the left. Now, remember what we said here months ago, before he even announced he was running. We said that the primaries would be great for Bitcoin introductions, right? In the sense that we talked about the two solitudes and how information rarely goes through one side. And we keep mentioning the Armageddon movie. Remember Armageddon, right? If you shoot the nuclear bomb on the asteroid from the outside, it'll just go through it. But if you get on the inside and blow it up, it's much more effective. And this relates to the echo chambers that either political party exists in. So information will travel really quickly inside of the echo chamber, but it rarely penetrates from the outside. That's why we're dealing with all this stuff. If you go talk to a normal libtard right now about what's going on with Trump, they're going to say, oh, democracy, no one is above the law, right? They've been programmed to say that. They've been hearing that for a while, and they're just not going to be able to say anything else because that's what's been preloaded into their brain, because the echo chamber is just reverberating it nonstop. So what I said originally, what was so appealing about RFK, besides his grasp of the issues, besides all of that stuff, is simply that he is on the left and can get information ricocheting through them, which they would otherwise not have access to. He's like the deep drilling team in Armageddon. And it would be the same on the, if someone had that sort of appeal on the other side, it would be sort of similar, right? And so once you break the shell and you're on the inside of the echo chamber, things can move really quickly, which is why I said it would be so great if the RFK candidacy happened, and why I predicted you'd get all kinds of subjects discussed with these new style of candidates, and the primaries would be so important for Bitcoin. And this is along the same lines. This is sort of proving that point. And Red Steez goes on to say that among President Biden's challengers for the presidential nomination in the Democrat Party, one in particular has the president's team sweating. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has emerged with 20% support. And remember, his support is greater than DeSantis relative to Trump, right? Greater than any of Trump's competitors. Trump is in a league of his own, but Biden actually has these competitors. So he's running with 20% support since announcing his campaign for president. But RFK Jr.'s auspicious rise is not due to anything he personally believes or any unique charisma. He's most well known for being an anti-vaxxer long before the COVID vaccine even existed. Instead, his success is a direct reflection of the authoritarian approach of the president and his party at managing COVID. So here's the Dallas Express talking about another poll, saying poll sees RFK Jr. nearly tie with Biden. The polls are coming, guys. Things are moving. And what they called them was within the article, right, about how this could even happen, right? He's a wackadoodle nut job conspiracy theorist seeking to capitalize on frustrations with the COVID-19 lockdowns and vaccine mandates. Win. It's a win. The minute they start insulting him like this, the minute they target him, it's energy monster stuff, right? What's going to happen is the same thing that happens to Trump. They didn't learn their lesson. They didn't learn it when they arraigned him the other day. When you see Trump sucking all the energy out of the room because they can't help but try to isolate and eliminate him from the problem, they've made it much worse. It's a metastasizing of what he does to the system. Now, the same thing can be said, and the same approach can be taken here with Robert Kennedy. The more they try to prevent him, the more you're going to get him in the news. So we love this stuff, right? Great news. Now that's sort of what's going on in America. You can hear more. There's Trump arraignment. You can't do that to a president. It's what if it would happen to the Biden? So that's pretty much all that's happening on either side of the news. If you go on Fox, this is unfair. If you go on CNN, well, the CNN ones are. So here's what Jen Psaki is worried about, right? That Trump is actually going to turn this into a television, like a reality TV show, but it's so serious. So, he shouldn't be turning it into a TV show, but don't worry, the legal system will muzzle him and all this stuff. So that's about all you're going to hear in the mainstream news. They're just talking about still the Trump thing and whatever. So we're going to talk about stuff abroad a little bit, because there's more happening abroad right now. Some of it somewhat related to America. So we'll come back home. But here's the most interesting thing. There's a bit of a slow news day out there, by the way. This is a normal time for slow news days, right? This is sort of the end of the school season. This is the period in which most people's agendas and schedules are the most out of whack. Did you know that these days in June are rife with divorce, rife with like major fighting, because everyone's rhythm is getting broken up, because every bit of schedule they've lived with since January is coming to sort of an end now, and the summer schedule starts. So it's kind of like that weird period. So that's probably why we're not getting much fake news out there, right? Because the fake news people are bringing kids to graduation and all that stuff. But there is some stuff. So here's the interesting thing. At the end of the summer, we've been targeting this date for this show, something we're going to be covering heavily, the BRICS 2 meeting, right? So the BRICS got pardon me, the BRICS guys are getting together in a few weeks, and they're going to be talking about, do we put out a shitcoin to compete against the dollar? How do we settle these energy markets? So some people, now this is a tiny little rumor now, right? So I'm not trying to say this is serious at all, but here's what Godfrey Benjamin has written about. He says, China throws weight behind BRICS expansion, eyes challenge to US dollar dominance as Bitcoin gains momentum. So here's what he says in the article. They talk about, the chairman of the State Duma, Russian market, the financial market in Russia. How do they capitalize? The search for an alternative to the US dollar is fast gaining attention, as other countries have also shown interest. Saudi Arabia and Iran have made tremendous efforts to shift their country's dependence on the dollar. In the bid to move towards de-dollarization, Bitcoin, the largest cryptocurrency by market cap, is becoming the most talked about alternative. The preference heightened during the recent price rally of the token. As the next BRICS summit draws closer, there are talks that the agenda may include Bitcoin integration. So let me just tell you something right now. If the BRICS shitcoiners opt for Bitcoin, it's game over. We're going to win by the end of the summer, right? Now, I think this guy's a bit out of touch. If it does happen, I mean, game on, right? We're going to win real quick. So I think this is reading a little too much into it, but nevertheless, that some people are starting to pick up on what we've been talking about here, that Bitcoin comes up the middle in any fight between a BRICS 2 shitcoin and the US dollar, is leading people to say, well, maybe we just avoid the fight with the BRICS 2 shitcoin and we just put it straight dollar to the other thing. If that happens, I mean, what a gift for Bitcoiners. What a gift. So we'll see. In my opinion, it's really possible. We'll find out. The Chinese look like they're interested. Now, it doesn't fit at all with the narrative around them banning Bitcoin for years. Why did they get rid of the machines? They'd have to probably eat a lot of crow and sort of step down and change a lot of their policies. Don't know if they're going to do that. So don't know if it's really happening, but there's things we can see in the marketplace that make us believe maybe, right? So I saw an analysis this morning that showed that Fidelity, BlackRock, and Bank of America have all drastically increased their positions in MicroStrategy, and they're now holding anywhere between 50 million and a few $100 million worth of MicroStrategy stock, which of course everyone knows is one of the best proxies for Bitcoin on the publicly traded markets, because it's becoming more and more like a quasi ETF, let's say. There's definitely still the cash flow of the MicroStrategy involved. It's not a pure Bitcoin play, but because MicroStrategy owns so much Bitcoin on its balance sheet, the value of MicroStrategy is intimately tied to the price of Bitcoin. And so you have this phenomenon where if someone wants to be sly about getting exposure to Bitcoin, you buy you buy the MSTR. So the MicroStrategy stock. So that's happening, right? We're seeing it happen. And if that's any indication that there is an appetite out there for this alternative, we're seeing it manifest. Now, China, of course, has its own issues, right? And we've talked about those issues many times. The things that Xi knows, for example, that the rest of the world probably isn't really factoring in. We know that President Xi in China is aware of the actual demographic numbers in China. All rumors suggest that the population in China is a lie. Officially, India passed China as the most populous country in the world a few months ago. But if you listen to the people who think they know the numbers for real and believe that Xi is operating under other assumptions and numbers which are supposed to be real, the population is actually a few 100 million less in China than they've said it is. It's already ascended into the old but poor category and are dealing with a bigger demographic problem than the Japanese right now. So is that true? Don't know. If Xi is actually playing that game, and he's working on bluffing, let's say, that the economy and the population aren't as bad in China, and that is one of the major foundations of BRICS to becoming successful, that these presuppositions have to be true, or else he's got to come up with a kind of a wild card. The wild card is Bitcoin, right? The wild card is Bitcoin. That would erase the trouble he has about the real demographic numbers and the real economic numbers. Now, will he do that? We don't know. We don't know. I doubt it. Like it's a less than 1% chance, right? Less than 1% chance. But people are noticing, and that's merely what I want to underline. That the ideas that we discussed here are starting to manifest in the real world. It's not just some Bitcoiner's fever dream to say that Bitcoin can come up the middle between a BRICS 2 shitcoin and US dollar fight. It's happening. Real people are doing it, right? So we continue to make that prediction. So things going on in China. It looks like Bill Gates, right? Bill Pizza Gates is headed over there. A senior board member of the USA regime will meet the political representative of China. Denis Rancourt says Bill Gates is going to meet President Xi on Friday, and they're going to be talking about vaccines, other things. They're going to be talking maybe about his. So the latest thing that everyone's angry with Bill Pizza Gates for is the mosquitoes. So now he's breeding a bunch of mosquitoes. So it's not just that he's buying the farmland to grow a bunch of corn and grow a bunch of other stuff that isn't meat. He's buying ranch land to buy other things, right? He's also got this huge. So here's the argument that he's making, and it's actually a good one, right? So as much as we like to make fun of Bill Gates, right? He still has some decent ideas, and the one he has here with the mosquitoes looks like this. There's a way to breed or breed out invasive species. Have you ever heard how it works? What you do is you release all males of one type into an environment, and eventually they'll take over. And so you can do this with, I guess they got a cat problem or something in Australia. You could use this for that, right? You release a bunch of single sex of an animal, of that one that's invasive they're trying to get rid of. Florida might do this with the boa constrictors, by the way. This is a real potential plan in Florida. Florida has an invasive, or pythons, pardon me. Florida has an invasive python snake issue, right? So people buy the pet pythons, and then they release them into Florida. Now the environment is so good for them in the Everglades that they're just taking over. So here's the argument: you release way more. I'm getting to that, Brian. That's what I'm getting to. I'm working to it. I'm working up to that. So that's what you do. You go to Florida and you release, thousands of male only pythons, and eventually there'll be no breeding and they'll go away. There'll be no more python invasion because you can start killing them. And that this is the better way than what they do right now, which is bounties, right? So they put up a bounty, kill this many pythons, you get some money, you trade them in for cash, and you go kill some more. So this whole thing is what Bill Pizza Gates said he's doing with the mosquitoes. Now he's got mosquito factories. He's making mosquito factories, right? Now, I don't know if it's a coincidence, right? I don't know if it's a coincidence, but some of the fake news had a story on the global warming thing yesterday. And here's what they say: world's deadliest diseases are coming to the UK because of climate change, or is it Bill Pizza Gates? Mosquitoes and ticks carrying viruses with death rates of up to 50% will make Britain home, right? So where are they coming from? Who knows? But indeed, as Brian mentioned, maybe he's trying to start a mosquito farm so that he can feed the people. Don't judge too quickly, guys. It's just a mosquito farm. He's trying to feed people, right? So there you go. We'll see if his genetically modified little fellas make it. But here's the most interesting China story I found, and it brings things back a little bit to America. And a lot of people are talking about this. I don't know what any of it means, so I'm just going to share some of the details. It could be absolutely nothing. But it starts with Matt Walsh, not the Matt Walsh from Daily Wire, who's always on about the trans stuff, who's very funny, by the way. We think he's hilarious, right? A very, very, very good entertainer. So Matt Walsh, there's another Matt Walsh, and this is Matt Walsh on Twitter, Matt Walsh in Boston. If you don't know who Matt Walsh is, I met him many years ago. He is part of Abby Johnson, who's the CEO of Fidelity, so one of the largest banks and wealth management outlets on earth. She herself was a Bitcoiner a long time ago, and her original staff, right? She had some original staff that helped her with the Bitcoin, and it was Nick Carter, and it was this guy Matt Walsh, and it was a few other people. They started mining Bitcoin. I booked her as a keynote speaker in 2017. That's how early she is. 2017, she spoke at Consensus, which is CoinDesk's event, and she was ready to divulge that she had. They called them the Bitcoin Vikings. They'd been mining Bitcoin. They did all this stuff. Very interesting lady. And Nick Carter was one of her first staff on this team, and this other guy Matt Walsh was one of the first staff as well. Matt Walsh and Nick Carter both went out and created their own VC firm called Castle Island Ventures. So he is Nick Carter's partner in Castle Island Ventures. So that's the background on him. And he's been sort of raising his eyebrow to something that the SEC has been doing and has a lot of questions. So it's this, I guess you can say, broker-dealer type exchange thing called Prometheum. And so here's what he says. This Prometheum storyline has got to be the strangest thing I've seen in a while in this industry. Has anyone actually looked into this? Beyond bizarre. He says, last month, in the midst of the SEC bringing cases on Coinbase and Gemini and giving the stiff arm to Robinhood and others, Prometheum gets approval for the first of its kind special purpose broker dealer for digital asset securities. Then Prometheum CEO somehow gets a seat in front of Congress yesterday and starts reading off pre-written notes, clearly coordinating narratives with Democratic members of Congress. So he was basically just saying everything that SBF used to say. So interesting. So Matt Walsh says this ATS absolutely will not work unless the projects first register the tokens with the SEC. There are currently no tokens registered with the SEC because the current regime is not viable for public blockchain networks. So they go on and on about what's going on here and how complicated things are. So he says his last point is, what is going on here? Bizarre that this fringe player with no business model is being held up as an example of compliance by the SEC when the actual businesses in the United States can't get a fair shot. An SEC psyop to have the Dems oppose McHenry-Thompson market structure bill. So he's predicting, is it a psyop? So here's another way of putting it. Adam Cochran breaks down the three possible answers to what's going on. So he says, these are plants who are, so he's talking about Prometheum and what they actually do in the marketplace. He says, these are plants who are being given a sweet regulatory deal in exchange. He's got three options, right? So this is number one. They're plants, sweet regulatory deal in exchange for engaging in a way the SEC wanted to, just like Gary was working on with SBF. So that's theory number one. Theory number two, these guys are using their SEC and FINRA connections to push an agenda to get certain assets deemed securities and for them to be the only approved market player to capture the markets. So basically trying to make a regulatory moat, right? A typical strategy, very common. Or number three, these guys are grifters who raised a ton of money from sketchy sources and for years have been twisting worse and progress to continue to ride the grift. Which is it, right? Well, to me, that they got the chance to testify in front of Congress. I know a little bit about how that works, and it really is one of these buddy-friendly things. And I just don't see how the sketchy grifter theory number three, twisting, and then, that doesn't really lead there. This other one about the regulatory moat, maybe they could have donated some money and found a way, because you got to basically get a congressman who's on the committee to nominate you to be one of the speakers during the steering committee meetings. That's how it works. They have steering committee meetings. Each of the steering committee members, so it's usually the chair, the vice chair, and a third, those three people will come together and set the agenda for the meetings. They'll decide which speakers when. Now, you've got researchers and all kinds of people. This is, by the way, this was my job before Bitcoin, right? So that's how I know. So I worked in several of these committees, so I know how the steering committee stuff works. And I know that, you have to influence the steering committee to get on one of these panels. And it's not that hard. They've got a bunch of slots, let's say, that they can award. And they're evenly divided between nominations from either party, so you can't flood the nominations to speak. Nominations is not the word. Selection. It's not a position. So there you go. My instinct says number three doesn't really fit because it wouldn't lead to the speaking session. Number two says they could spend some of that money and get some political donations and speak. But as Brian Peterson says, it smells like the SBF situation, and doesn't look good. Doesn't look good. So we'll see what that means. But here's the and here's from Juthika Chu, who had a really interesting way to put it. Now, Juthika, I worked with Juthika. She is one of the top people over at Kraken, and I've known Juthika for years. I was lucky enough to sit next to her at a speaker dinner in 2016 in New York City, and we became friends. And she was at the time leading efforts to become the first ever licensed derivatives platform. LedgerX is what she helped found. So LedgerX indeed was the first platform in America to have permits to do derivatives trading. This strategy they used was just simply copied by the Chicago, the CBOE and the Chicago Exchange, and they ended up getting a lot larger market share. They came in months after, and these guys sort of twisted in the wind for years, and in the end, she moved over to Kraken, and I guess someone bought LedgerX. I think it was one of the big exchanges bought LedgerX. But indeed, what we are dealing with here is exactly like Felipe has said. Corrupt bureaucrats and politicians are trying to take over crypto while Wall Street suppresses the price of Bitcoin. I don't know about the suppressive Bitcoin. They do that. That's sort of what's been going on. So I'm not going to fully argue with that. But here's what you get from all this, right? You get a situation where, because the narrative with SBF can't be controlled the way it was, because mainstream media, and that's why we start every show with Moscow Time, or we're mentioning the narrative leak all over the place. That's why Trump is so dangerous, right? Trump has always been a reality distortion field amongst, just by living, right? Just by living, he distorts the reality that a lot of folks have around media, politics, and all that. And in the same way that I was mentioning earlier with RFK in the Armageddon scenario where he's inside, because the ability to maintain the echo chamber is deconstructing and falling apart in front of our eyes, we have the opportunity to have all of these questions at a much higher amplification, at a much higher level of engagement. And the SEC question is another one of those ones where we're going to be looking at federal institutions which have no business to be alive. And we're going to be able to analyze whether they continue in the future. And again, here's another, I've been mentioning this for a while, why RFK fits into this. His granddaddy set up the SEC. So of all the people that understand how corrupt it's become, he's probably one of them. And now that we can have, because media is changing so quickly, we're going to have a chance to talk about this stuff. And just to give you a sense of how quickly media is changing, here's something that happened last night. So, Andrew Tate, he did a live stream on Rumble last night, right? Just one single live stream. It was, I didn't watch it or anything like that, but I've seen the reactions, and here's what happened. Rumble tweeted, "Massive technological feat today, over almost 500,000 viewers on one stream. Our servers in the USA were humming flawlessly without issue. If you were overseas, some ISPs couldn't keep up with the size of the live stream and may have experienced some lag, but that's not their fault." So Chris Pavlovsky mentioning here that it was an unbelievable accomplishment, and that just by him going on and doing a live stream and getting 500,000 viewers just like that is as big a feat as anything that's happened on Twitter in a long time. YouTube doesn't, there's not a lot of political shows on YouTube with 500,000 live viewers, right? So right away, the ability to control narrative after COVID has just been completely wiped away. People's demand and appetite for other media sources led them to things like Rumble. And now it's established. Just a year ago, total viewers simultaneously on Rumble at 500,000 would have been news. Total viewers. Everyone on the site at one time actually did make the news when they did that one time last summer. Since then, they've now got it so that one channel, right? It used to be all of Rumble, 500,000 at once. Now it's one channel. And so they're dealing with more than 1 million average viewers at any moment, right? Which is big numbers, bigger than most television networks. Now, I understand it's spread over more channels. It's like arguing how many people are on cable at any one time in America versus on Rumble, in a sense. So it's not apples to apples, but nevertheless, the growth is interesting. Then how about this, right? So it turns out that, and Elon Musk responded to this, it turns out that Twitter has become the 5th most visited website in the world now. So if Rumble, which is in a more extreme version of breaking the narrative, um, um, you get Twitter now, which has been probably most responsible for breaking the narrative with Twitter files and everything that Elon Musk has done over there, is now the 5th most visited website in the world. Elon says, not bad, right? Not bad. And then Elon also joined in the conversation around NOSTR, right? So NOSTR, we've known now for 2 days, looks like they're going to be kicked off the Apple Store. Lots of people talking about it, but it hasn't really risen to the level of, it's not like all of society has waited with bated breath to find out what happens with NOSTR's fight in the Apple Store. But you get people like Jack Dorsey coming up and saying, Apple's not understanding what's going on. They shouldn't be doing this. And Elon Musk commented, right? If Apple competes against the whole world, Apple will have the whole world against it. This is not a winning scenario. So indeed, you get two of the biggest, both the previous CEO of Twitter and the current CEO of Twitter taking aim at Apple and their own echo chamber and their inability to support freedom of speech beyond what's going on, because Apple News is terrible. It's really bad. So that this is happening now, I think, is a really good sign and can continue to open people's eyes, right? Open people's eyes. So we get federal institutions now, right? And this is sort of what we talk about here on the Breakup a lot, re-architecting the responsibilities, the calibration, the coordination of the US federal government. And we can see it happening all around us. Like even this questioning around the SEC now and how that is breaking out of the narrative. Jeff John Roberts says, check out our chart of SEC Chair Gary Gensler counter-programming Congress at least 6 times this year. Admin law experts say this is all in the game for agency heads, but it's still remarkable. So you're seeing him basically try to fight for his position, but the narrative that the politicians are getting drawn into continues to change. But the more, SEC is just one version of this, right? The more interesting one is the one we mentioned at the very start about federal institutions, trusts, desire, appetite for change, media that can now facilitate the conversations to have change. And we go back to RFK and this whole thing about the vaccines and what I said about the Armageddon piece, vaccine skepticism among the left finally arriving. And you're starting to see that. And what we're seeing from, and sort of this is the benefit that we're starting to experience, where you can almost say we're already living in a golden age because we're having these conversations finally. Kanakoa the Great here bringing up the Pfizer document, right? So vaccine skepticism, now getting some numbers connected to it. And a confidential Pfizer document dated August 2022, so not a year ago, shows the company observed 1.6 million adverse events from the vaccine. Vascular disorders, nervous system disorders are the largest, right? There are almost 700,000 nervous system disorders that resulted from the vaccine, according to these numbers. Now, I don't know how cause and effect these are, but, for example, they put 77,000 psychiatric disorders. I don't know how that works. Don't understand any of it, but here's what people are saying, because just a few days ago, Dr. Walensky, before she she was coming out to talk about the vaccine, and they she says they don't have any data on the adverse effects of the vaccine, right? So what I mentioned here is they've known about this document from Pfizer since 2022, and she just 3 days ago testifying said, no, we have no data. So War Clandestine says the public were coerced to undergo a potentially harmful medical experiment based on the data that didn't exist. Direct violation of the Nuremberg Code. So Dr. Walensky, she's going to be taking a plane ride, right? She's going to be on the plane, according to war clandestine. And I'm for it, right? If we find out that the lying was this bad, because now we have the ability to talk about it, we got to do some of these really exciting executions, like really high production value, Tom Cruise hosting, fly them to space, drop them out of a plane, bet on hang time, bet on target practice, bet on all these things. And everyone's going to watch because there's pretty much no other thing we can do to make sure that this never happens again, right? So dropping Walensky from space, dropping Fauci from space, very important, right? I don't know if RFK is going to embrace my space dropping policies, but the next time I get in front of him, I'm definitely going to push for space drops. Now, you can also plug into this category, right? Trump taking all the air out of the room, but these little important conversations that are happening in the meantime, right? The one on BRICS 2 shitcoin, maybe talking about Bitcoin. This one on vaccine questions starting to grow in amplification. But the most important one, right? So we've only been hearing Trump, 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 but the counteroffensive in Ukraine and Russia has been happening for days. And what do we learn about that, right? Well, we don't know. Remember, we don't know anything that's happening in Ukraine and Russia. Everything I say in Ukraine and Russia is weakly held, right? So I could change my mind tomorrow on Ukraine and Russia. And so I'm not telling you to take long-term view of what I say about Ukraine and Russia, because I admit openly that I don't know. I don't know what's happening there. Too full of spin doctors, too full of psyops. But War Clandestine, who's been pretty good source on Ukraine, Russia stuff, says the following. That the counteroffensive has been underway for about 10 days. Putin reports that Ukrainian losses are catastrophic and that they're suffering 10x casualties with massive vehicle losses. And that the highly publicized counteroffensive has been a colossal failure. So how do we know? We're never going to know the details, right? The details we won't know. But we'll know whether this worldview is accurate in a short time, by the end of the summer, in this scenario. If the U.S. NATO side starts talking about peace negotiations, what War Clandestine said here is true. If there's no talk from the U.S. NATO side about peace negotiations, then the numbers Putin gave, I think, are a lie. Now, that's simple. I could be totally backwards even, right? Again, we don't know. But that's the best I can come up with. All right, team. Let's see what we got here. Not too many comments today. Bitcoin hitting 1 million will Trump probably feel like Trump winning again. Yeah, Trump winning again, it'll feel a lot better. That Trump winning again was fun. It was fun. It was one of the best days going, right? I'll never forget what a fun day that was. Just hilarious. But I'd say $1 million Bitcoin is more interesting. All right. American financial losses in Ukraine seem catastrophic. Yeah, but it's fake money. So how much do they really lose, right? Fake. I can lose fake money all day, and it wouldn't bother me. I've lost a lot of paper money in my life. All these stupid stocks going down in value, right? Who cares? It's not real. All right, team. That's all I got for today. Catch me at 12:30. I will be on Bitcoin Magazine Live with Ansel Linder. We'll be doing Fed Watch. It's going to be great. You'll be lucky if you're there. You're going to love it. All right. Another good breakup. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Rand Moore, pardon me. And see y'all tomorrow.